Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan-Miller Report, we have an update from Ukraine tonight as the Donetsk airport continues to be hit upon by Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces. We have an exclusive report from the ITV News' John Irvine in the region as they have gained rare access to the airport. Also on tonight's program, and the horrific fate of the captured Jordanian pilot has unleashed a wave of grief and rage today across the Middle East. Also tonight, Boko Haram kills dozens in a rampage after the Chad offensive. Syrian Kurds advance and face no resistance near Kobané. And the Democrats run the Israeli ambassador through the wood chipper. We got the latest on that. All those stories and more, plus the one and the only Corey Evan. Let's hope he doesn't have any flame retardant to add to those wood chips.
Oh, yeah, we don't want any of that. Asia turboprop plane goes down in Taiwan, and it's caught on camera, stunningly. Ted Cruz admits he smoked pot as a youngster. Rolls eyes. Get over it, you blowhards. The oil price hemorrhaging leads to a Brazilian oil boss getting busted over corruption. In lawsuits across America, that is, terminally ill litigants in New York argue in favor of assisted suicide. Dr. Kevorkian would be so proud. And what will a Katy Perry mobile game be like? A teenage dream? I'll look into it in the Evan-Miller Report, your conservative news source. All those stories and more, starting right now. Play that beautiful theme, James.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan-Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Wednesday, February the 4th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evan this evening.
It's a beautiful evening out here. It doesn't feel like winter, though. Kind of
it feels like
weird
we're stuck
being
right in the middle of April, in the middle of springtime, and it's only February. Beautiful weather
Yeah.
we're having. And ladies and gentlemen, I gotta say, if you live in Southern California, you really do pay for your sunshine out here in the
Absolutely. Hopefully it doesn't affect my snow tubing trip this Saturday, but thankfully Big Bear.
Okay, we lost Corey Evan there for a minute, but I think he was talking about his snow trip sometime this Saturday. I didn't get the location there.
Yeah, I was just
Maybe
saying
it's
that
Big
there was
Bear.
a snowball trip. Yeah, Big Bear, yeah, definitely.
So, well, hopefully Corey has a wonderful time throwing the snowballs out there over in Big Bear. And I can tell you, folks, if you ever come out to Southern California, Big Bear is a place you gotta go. A very beautiful place to go indeed.
Yes.
All right, folks. We'll be back with Corey Evan with some of the day's other news in a minute, including a Taiwanese jet going down today, killing 27 people, and it's all caught on tape. But first, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we start off in the Ukraine, where the battle-scattered airport at Donetsk is a symbol of how far Ukraine has fallen and of the bitter conflict that brought about that fall. Extensively rebuilt ahead of the 2012 UEFA European Championships, the airport was a showpiece of Ukraine's progress and closer relations with Europe. Today, what remains of the rubble-strewn runways and terminal buildings is guarded by pro-Russian rebels after months of intense fighting with the Ukrainian army. For the latest out of Ukraine and what happened at this airport, we go to the ITV News' senior international correspondent, John Irvine, with more on this story. John?
Of multiple civilian fatalities in Europe's latest war. It was noon and busy here when the shell landed just feet from the hospital's front door. Both the Ukrainians and the pro-Russian rebels accuse each other of firing indiscriminately, and they're both right. They're unleashing rockets and artillery shells to and from civilian areas with shocking frequency.
The watching world will of course be appalled by this strike on a hospital, but in truth it comes as no great surprise. Eastern Ukraine's descent into something resembling total war has been precipitous and unstoppable.
Nowhere is that fact more visible than at Donetsk airport, where the separatists took us today. They seized the main terminal last month, but their grip isn't as secure as they'd like. Our hosts are proud they have taken the airport, but at what a price. Winning was everything. Such is the level of destruction, there are no spoils left to be had. It may lie in ruins, but such is its significance, the Ukrainian army is still trying to take it back. The airport was built especially for the 2012 football Euros. It symbolized Ukraine's rise and its European credentials. That's why both sides regard it as such a prize.
The last time we were here was actually as passengers back in April. There were flights to all over the place in Western Europe. There were flights to Germany. There was actually one to Gatwick as well. It's quite terrible what hatred has done in such a short time to such a symbol of ambition and progression.
The Ukrainian soldiers who defended the airport were nicknamed the cyborgs because of their almost robotic resilience. This is one of their tanks amid the rubble. They held out for months before the superior firepower of the rebels broke their resistance. We were told that while some Ukrainian bodies have been recovered, many more are still under the rubble.
Here lie the bodies of a dozen Ukrainian soldiers. There hasn't been a long enough lull in the fighting here yet for an exchange of the dead.
It's not just soldiers who are being mourned. This is the funeral of Dmitry Limonov, who died here on Sunday. Dmitry and his wife Nastia had a baby 3 weeks ago. She remains in the hospital where she became both a mother and a widow. A shell killed Dmitry as he walked home to collect baby milk. As the mourners wept, the cause of death echoed around the city. More grief and destruction being dispensed. Late this afternoon, when one of our teams came across this smouldering car, they saw the dead driver still at the wheel. Yet another wrong time, wrong place civilian killed by a random shell. The war here is worsening by day and by night. John Irvine, ITV News, Donetsk, Eastern Ukraine.
And many thanks to John Irvine for bringing us that report out of Ukraine tonight. Just shows to tell you how bad the situation is over there in Ukraine tonight. Meanwhile, here back in the United States, the White House's pick for defense secretary has said he is inclined to send weapons to Ukraine to fight against Russian-backed rebels. Ashton Carter's reports came at his confirmation hearing before a Senate panel as successor to current Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. The U.S. has so far provided non-lethal assistance to Ukraine, like night vision goggles and radios. But President Obama is said to be reconsidering his position, accusing Russia of escalating the conflict. Russia denies accusations by Ukraine and the West of arming the separatists and sending its regular troops across the border. Fighting has intensified, as it was reported by John Irvine from ITV News, in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions, leaving a September ceasefire in tatters. Fighting has also continued around the key government town of Dnistev, northeast of Donetsk. EU Foreign Policy Chief Fedora Morgai appealed for a truce to allow civilians to leave the area. Mr. Carter, meanwhile, who previously served as Deputy Secretary of Defense, appeared in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee to be questioned before a wider Senate vote. Can't speak tonight. I'm very much inclined in that direction, Mr. Chairman, because I think we need to support the Ukrainians in defending themselves, Mr. Carter said when asked by Senator John McCain if he supported delivering defensive weapons to Ukraine. The nature of those arms I can't say right now, he added. White House spokesman and BS artist Josh Earnest later stressed that President Obama, not Mr. Carter, would make the final decision on the issue. But Mr. Earnest added, quote, the president is certainly interested in the view, the opinion, and the insight of his national security team, including what we hope will be his soon-to-be confirmed new Secretary of Defense, and the president will certainly take that advice into account. Meanwhile, the horrific fate of a captured Jordanian pilot burned to death by the Islamic State group unleashed a wave of grief and rage on Wednesday across the Middle East, a region long riven by upheavals and violence. Political and religious leaders united in outrage and condemnation, saying the slaying of the airmen goes against Islam's teachings. The gruesome militant video of the last moments in the life of a 26-year-old Lieutenant Muth al-Kashbin, whose F-16 crashed in Syria back in December during a U.S.-led coalition raid on the extremist group, crossed a line beyond the beheadings of Western hostages at the hands of ISIS extremists. From the world's most prestigious seat of the Sunni Islam learning, Cairo's Al-Ajib Mosque, Grand Imam Ahmed al-Tashib said the ISIS militants deserve the correct punishment of death, crucifixion, or the chopping off of their arms for being enemies of God and the Prophet Muhammad. He continues saying, quote, Islam prohibits the taking of innocent life. By burning the pilot to death, he added the militants violated Islam's prohibition on the immolation of mutilation of bodies even during wartime. And you know what, Corey Evan? I say it's about time people like this cleric Al-Tahib finally came out and said what these people are doing wrong. We don't often see this. And I say it's about damn time.
It's amazing. And you know, I'd like to hear what the leaders of our church have to say about what's going on. The church I go to, that is, the Mormon church up in Salt Lake, I'm sure that they've got a few somber words to say about the whole thing as well.
Certainly is. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we'll see what happens with this. And just to let you know, last night Jordan did sentence 2 prisoners in regards to this, including the female suicide bomber that was supposed to be traded off for this pilot. Apparently, it is rumored that she was executed last night along with another prisoner. So we'll keep you up to date on that information as it becomes available here on the Evan-Miller Report. Meantime, over to Nigeria, where Nigerian Boko Haram fighters went on the rampage in the Cameroonian border town of Fotoko Wednesday, massacring dozens of civilians and torching a mosque before being repelled by regional forces. The onslaught came a day after Chad sent troops across the border to flush the jihadists out of the Nigerian town of Gambaru, which lies some 500 meters or yards from Fotoko on the other side of a bridge. Chad's army said it had killed more than 200 Boko Haram militants in the intervention, the first by regional forces against Boko Haram on its home ground. But some of the insurgents escaped, it added. On the Cameroonian side of the border, the Boko Haram assault on Fotoko left nearly 70 civilians and 6 Cameroonian soldiers dead, a local security source has told the AFP news agency. Meanwhile, in Syria, Kurdish forces made fresh advances today near the flashpoint town of Kobane, bringing the number of villages they have recaptured from ISIS down to 50, or 250, Monitor has said. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the Kurdish People's Protection Units, backed by rebel fighters, are continuing to advance in the countryside of Kobane, facing no resistance from ISIS. Speaking to the AFP news agency, Observer Director Rami Abdul Rahman said the YPG's advance over the past week has been speedy. He continued to say as soon as the YPG enters into a village, the ISIS withdraws its fighters. After nearly 5 months of fighting for Kobane, which is strategically located on the Turkish border, the YPG recaptured the town back on January the 26th. Battles then broke out for 350 villages surrounding the town. So far, the Kurds have reclaimed, as we said, 50 of those villages, according to the observatory. The number of villages reclaimed by the YPG has risen to 50, according to the Britain-based group. The YPG's advances come amid fresh U.S.-led coalition airstrikes against ISIS positions around Kobane. According to the Pentagon, coalition warplanes carried out 11 airstrikes against ISIS positions in the area from Tuesday to Wednesday morning. North Korea today ruled out resuming dialogue with what they say is the gangster-like United States and vowed to respond to any U.S. aggression with nuclear strikes and cyber warfare. The bellicose statement from the country's top military body, the National Defense Commission, came after reported moves by Washington and Pyongyang to revive long-stalled six-nation talks on denuclearization in the region. It also proceeded to the start in early March of an annual joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises that always precede a sharp spike in military tensions and rhetoric on the divided peninsula. The NDC statement was an apparent reaction to remarks President Obama made regarding the eventual collapse of the regime in North Korea, which the U.S. president called, quote, the most cut out nation on earth. The NDC statement, which labeled the Obama administration, quote, a mudslinging cesspool, said the president's comments amounted to a threat to engineer the country's downfall. And they continued to say, quote, since the gangster-like U.S. imperialists are blaring they will bring down the DPRK, also known as North Korea, the army and people to the DPRK cannot but officially notify the Obama administration that the DPRK has neither need nor willingness to sit at a negotiating table with the U.S. any longer. This statement carried by the North's official KCNA news agency entitled U.S. Imperialists Will Face Doom said North Korea would respond to any U.S. military aggression in kind, whether with conventional, nuclear, or cyber forces. All right, folks, it's time to send it over to Corey Evan now, and he has the latest on that jet that crashed over in Thailand. And Corey, I've seen the images on this from our foreign news desk tonight. My goodness, it's a rare sight when we catch a plane crash live on camera.
Absolutely. As in, just a note to North Korea on your story, Jay. Number one, you're neither democratic nor a People's Republic, North Korea. And secondly, I thank you very much for not using an outdated 1940s reference to the U.S. in any future reports. But at any rate, rescue teams in Taiwan continued the somber search for survivors and bodies today after the spectacular crash of a TransAsia Airways prop jet captured on dramatic video, as Jay mentioned. At least 26 people died, but 15 survived when the plane clipped its left wing on a bridge shortly after taking off. Taiwanese rescuers were using a massive crane to hoist the French-built ATR 72-600 plane from the shallow Murky River after survivors were brought to safety on rubber rafts or scrambled to the riverbank on their own. One injured person was reportedly found in a park along the river, the Taiwan News reported. Wu Zhonghong, a Taipei Fire Department official coordinating the rescue, said he was not too optimistic that more survivors would be found. Dramatic dashcam footage from vehicles on an elevated highway clearly shows the plane's tragic crash. Some Taiwanese paid homage to the pilot, saying he made a desperate, deliberate choice to avoid the additional casualties likely if the plane had hit nearby apartment buildings, high schools, and roads. Taiwan's Liberty Times newspaper quoted online comments thanking and praising the pilot's actions, although aviation authorities could not immediately confirm such an effort took place. The fate of pilot Liao Jianzong, who reportedly had nearly 5,000 hours of flying experience, was not immediately known. Stay with us here at the Evan-Miller Report. I will bring you details on this as soon as they become available, either on our next report or on the Facebook page. Look out for those. Hundreds of feet of electrified rail skewered the first two carriages of a New York commuter train in a collision with a car at a railroad crossing, a federal investigator said on Wednesday to Reuters, describing the area's worst rail crash in decades. Investigators were focused on why the car was stopped at the crossing near the suburb of White Plains north of New York City before the Metro North train crashed into it during Tuesday evening's rush hour, pushing the vehicle about 1,000 feet down the line. The rail broke into long pieces, penetrating the first train carriage as a fire broke out, apparently fueled by gasoline in the vehicle's gas tank, gutting the rail car's interior, he said. At least one section of the electrified third rail, as it's known, also entered the second carriage near its ceiling. Robert Sumwalt, a member of the NTSB, said at a news conference ahead of a week of gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses that he expected to release data from the recorder on the train on Thursday. 5 train passengers and the woman who was driving the Mercedes SUV that was stuck on the tracks were killed. Investigators said they do not yet have an explanation for how the vehicle, which officials had earlier mistaken for a Jeep, became stuck on the tracks. The NTSB released a report late last year that also identified common safety issues, but Sumwalt said Tuesday's crash may be unrelated. Well, I'll keep an eye on this story as well, and I'll bring you any details as they become relevant. Next up out of Pittsburgh, according to CBS News, a former University of Pittsburgh researcher was sentenced for the death of his wife today. Lois Klein was helped to the microphone in the courtroom by prosecutor Lisa Pellegrini and asked the prosecutor to read her victim impact statement for her. She wrote in part, quote, "Autumn was our only child and the light of our lives has now been extinguished. There's no longer peace in our lives. Every day something is different. I certainly don't want to give Ferrante any credit, but he has certainly ruined our lives. All she ever wanted to do was to be able to help people. People all over the world are now losers," unquote. Klein was referring to her daughter, Dr. Autumn Klein, whose April 2013 death, say prosecutors, was the result of cyanide ordered by and administered to her, they say, by her husband, Robert Ferrante. Ferrante was formally sentenced to life in prison Wednesday for his first-degree murder conviction handed down in November. One of the jurors who found him guilty, Helen Ewing, came to Wednesday's sentencing. She said, quote, "I want some closure on the decision I made. I still think about it all the time, and I think about Autumn's family, and I think we did the right thing." Their final verdict on the jury was unanimous, but they didn't start out that way, and the defense will argue there wasn't enough evidence to convict. Meantime, negotiations are underway to create a trust fund from Ferrante's assets.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we lost Corey Evan at this particular point. So in the meantime, while we try to get Corey back, we're going to go ahead and take an ad break here on the program. When we return, though, tonight here on the program, we got the business news, which include the EU is toughening its stance on Greece tonight. We got that in business news tonight. Also tonight in global socialism, a panel passes abortion and stem cell research ban bills over in Oklahoma. We give you the latest on that. And the Democrats got into a heated meeting with Israel's ambassador to the U.S. and throws them through the wood chipper. We'll tell you what was said, including Corey's lawsuits across America and the entertainment report on your conservative news source, the Evan-Miller Report. You're listening to the SHR Media Network, and we'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
Is radio.
News. News. News.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Some of America's bravest warriors are returning home wounded. Here's one of them.
My name is Norberto Lara. I served for 11 years in the United States Army. While I was on a combat patrol in Baqaba, Iraq, a rocket-propelled grenade took my arm off at the shoulder. When I came home, I felt alone. My family was around me, but I couldn't talk to them about what I'd seen and what I'd done. I remember just thinking, man, the way I am right now, I don't want to live. I was discharged from the Army, and I've been working with the Wounded Warrior Project since 2007. You don't have to be severely wounded to be with the Wounded Warrior Project. We do have a lot of guys that have post-traumatic stress disorder. Being able to share your story, I guess it kind of helps you wrap your mind around what did happen over there. Just because you have left the military doesn't mean your life is over. Because when these guys are coming home, I'm kind of leading and training them. Instead of for combat, I'm leading and training them to heal. If I come away with anything from Wounded Warrior Project, it's them giving my life back. My name is Norby, and yes, I do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm okay.
Don't suffer in silence. Contact woundedwarriorproject.org.
Let's get back to the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
And welcome back to the Evan-Miller Report. I'm Corey Evan. Jay will be right back in just a few short moments. But first, we've got your stock reports. The Dow was up, but only by 6 points, so just barely at 17,673. The Nasdaq is down 11 points at 4716, and the S&P 500 down 8 points at 2041. So middle of the week feels like the middle of the road, really. And that same sort of sentiment echoes around the world with the FTSE and the Nikkei down, but the DAX and the Hang Seng up. Companies added more than 200,000 workers to payrolls in January for a fifth consecutive month, signaling steady labor market growth, they say, according to a private payrolls report. The 213,000 increase in employment followed a 253,000 December gain that was larger than initially reported. Figures from Roseland, New Jersey-based ADP Research Institute showed Wednesday. The median projection of 44 economists surveyed by Bloomberg called for an advance of 223,000. The U.S. labor market is demonstrating that it can keep adding jobs even as slumping energy prices hurt industries exposed to oil. The Labor Department report on Friday is projected to show the world's largest economy added 231,000 jobs last month. We'll be the judge of that here at the Evan-Miller Report. Office supply chain Staples, moving on to that story, agreed to buy its sole remaining competitor, Office Depot, in a $6.3 billion deal that would create one mega office supply chain. This according to USA Today, but fears of antitrust opposition sent shares of Staples plummeting 12%, despite applause from investors for the proposal. The merger, which vows cost savings of $1 billion after closing, must be approved by the FTC, and while the regulator passed a recent marriage between Office Depot and OfficeMax in 2013, investors are jittery that the FTC could raise questions about joining the last two surviving office supply chains. Quote, I think they have to fight it, Staples co-founder and former CEO Tim Stemberg said of the FTC's potential view of the merger. Staples faces potentially a long and nasty legal skirmish to get it done, Stemberg said on CNBC. Staples also spooked investors with its closing conditions, which would allow it to walk away if FTC approval of the deal grew too onerous. Staples can back out of the deal, for example, if antitrust authorities require divestiture of assets, such as the sale of store locations that deliver more than $1.25 billion of Office Depot's 2014 revenues in the U.S. Shares of Staples closed down $2.28 at $16.73. Office Depot shares rose 21 cents, or 2.2%, to $9.49, well below the proposed merger value of $11 a share. If the deal is approved, Staples will acquire all the outstanding shares of Office Depot for $7.25 in cash and about 22 cents of a share in Staples stock. That values Office Depot at $11 a share, or a premium of 44% over the closing price of Office Depot's shares as of February 2nd. The two companies will boast pro forma annual sales of approximately $39 billion, Staples said. That compares to pro forma sales of $17 billion for Office Depot. Staples reported $23.1 billion in revenue in 2013, a drop of 5.2% over its 2012 revenue. So we will keep an eye on those two and see if they manage to get along. But having just witnessed the Office Depot Office Max merger, it could get hairy and messy. Speaking of messy, shares of Brazil's state-run oil company Petrobras seesawed today after its CEO and other top executives resigned amid a massive corruption scandal, fueling uncertainty about the future of the firm's management. This from Reuters. The volatility in Petrobras shares reflected on Brazil's benchmark Bovespa index, which posted losses as falling oil and commodities prices also weighed on shares of minor Vale SA. Other Latin American bourses posted gains, while Mexico's IPC index 0.6% higher. In Brazil, Petrobras preferred shares jumped as much as 7.8% on top of Tuesday's 15% rally after the company announced its board would meet on Friday to elect replacements for CEO Maria das Graças Foster and other senior management. With the abrupt move, some investors decided to sell Petrobras until it becomes clear who will eventually try to turn around a company that has so far been unable to publish audited third-quarter results with necessary write-downs related to corruption practices. In early afternoon, shares of Petrobras were at 0.3% lower after slumping more than 4% minutes earlier. Other analysts warned Petrobras will remain a risky bet, particularly as the new management is likely to be chosen by the same board of directors who were in charge of the company while the multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal developed. So, as I toss it over to you, Jay, before we go to Europe and what the ECB plans to do to Greece and their debt, I gotta get your thoughts on what's going on with the replacement of Petrobras' top management. Quite messy, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is, Corey, and I've been covering this story for the past couple months since this whole thing started. And the government's intertwined in this deal with this, and it'll be very interesting to see if the state prosecutors over in Brazil do actually decide to prosecute these people despite them resigning their posts there. I'm interested to see if there's any legal action. But according to people I've talked to who have lived in the region, Brazil is so corrupt, it would not be surprising if that does not even happen at all.
Yeah, on top of how corrupt their oil industry has been with the government getting their hands in it, I also have noted in previous times, at least in my own personal research, all their building safety concerns as well. So you can tell how corrupt they are because of how they let, nightclubs run without safety checks, and some of their office buildings, if you're in them in the event of a fire, good luck.
Certainly is. All right, Corey Evan.
I'm just saying there's a lot out there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, Corey Evan with the latest on the petroleum in Brazil tonight. Thank you very much for that. Move over to the European Central Bank, where they have toughened their stance with Greece by restricting financing to the country's banks. In a statement, the central bank said it would no longer accept Greek government bonds as collateral for lending money to commercial banks. The move makes access to cash more expensive for Greece's banks. The ECB said the suspension came as it could not assume a successful deal on Greece's $240 billion in Greece dollars bailout. The newly elected Greek government is in talks with international creditors over the terms of its bailout, which it thinks are too harsh. The Greek finance ministry said the ECB's decision, which is due to come into effect on February the 11th, would have no adverse impact on the country's financial industry. It said the sector was fully protected with other options still available. Earlier on Wednesday, Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis met with ECB's president Mario Draghi to discuss the country's bailout. Analysts said the ECB statement was a sign that the meeting had not been a success. This is clearly the ECB signaling the Greek government, you're going to have to talk to international leaders, the Troika, and get a deal. Jacob Kirkhart, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, told the AP. Otherwise, really bad things are going to happen, he said. The euro fell sharply against the dollar on the news, dropping more than a cent to 1.1331. Mr. Young-Vars is due to meet his German counterpart on Thursday, one of the toughest critics of the new Greek government. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time now for the latest on our continuing battle against Cue the Loud Echo.
Global socialism! Oh, wait a minute, there it is. Global socialism!
Thank you very much for that. And we start off tonight's global socialism in Oklahoma tonight, where a bill to further restrict abortion in Oklahoma and another to make embryonic stem cell research illegal. Both cleared a House committee today, despite concerns from a doctor on the panel. While activists gathered at the Capitol for the annual anti-abortion Rose Day rally, the House Public Health Committee voted almost along party lines to approve both bills. An exception was Representative Doug Cox, a Grove Republican and an emergency room physician who opposed both measures. One bill would increase from 24 to 72 hours the amount of time a woman must wait before receiving an abortion after receiving certain information about the procedure, including the age of the fetus, risk involved in the ultrasound, and heart tone monitoring are available. Representative Lisa Billy, a Republican from Lindsay in Oklahoma, said the purpose of the bill is to empower women by giving them more time to consider the implications of an abortion, but Cox said it amounted to government intrusion into a medical decision that should be between a woman and her doctor. The other bill would make it a felony crime to perform embryonic stem cell research in Oklahoma. The bill is opposed by many doctors and business groups like the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, who argue it could impede scientific research in Oklahoma. House author Representative Dan Fisher, Republican from El Reno in Oklahoma, said he believes the destruction of human embryos equates to taking of a human life and should be illegal. Both bills now proceed to the House floor in Oklahoma. Similar stem cell research bans have been derailed in the legislature in previous years. And now we go over to Corey Evan and with more on tonight's Global Socialism.
Here's what I got for you, Jay. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler revealed Wednesday that he'll propose applying decades-old communications rules to internet service providers to ensure that the internet remains open to all legal content, an option that cable companies and other ISPs had feared and fought against vigorously. President Obama said late last year that he favored the Title II option. Wheeler also indicated that he was leaning toward the approach, which would impose stringent rules on internet providers at the CES trade show in Las Vegas last month. Wheeler's proposal would mostly ban content providers from paying cable internet companies, phone companies, and wireless carriers to buy faster internet lanes for their service, a practice known as paid prioritization. ISPs also specifically would be prohibited from blocking or deliberately slowing access to legal content. Quote, using the Title II authority, I am submitting to my colleagues the strongest open internet protections ever proposed by the FCC, Wheeler wrote in a story posted Wednesday on Wired.com. These enforceable, bright-line rules will ban paid prioritization and the blocking and throttling of lawful content and services. I propose to fully apply for the first time ever those bright-line rules to mobile broadband. My proposal assures the rights of internet users to go where they want, when they want, and the rights of innovators to introduce new products without asking anyone's permission, unquote. Wheeler's proposal will allow exceptions to Title II requirements and refrain from some provisions that don't apply to ISPs. The FCC will not regulate pricing and will impose no tariffs or rules that would require unbundling of services for consumers, he said. ISPs also will be allowed to conduct internet pipe engineering work related to reasonable network management. Define reasonable network management, Mr. Wheeler. I mean, I admit, having tried several internet service providers, I have come across throttling myself, but at the same time, all these bans on paid prioritization, it just feels like it's trying to derail free commerce, doesn't it, Jay?
Yeah, I certainly see a little bit of restrictive freedom in this, so it does not look good for the consumer, this bill.
Yeah, it could make things worse, ladies and gentlemen, so be weary.
Indeed. You got a closing statement there, Corey?
So, how will we keep the freedom of the internet free? Where can the unborn future of the world turn for peace? And where's Ron Burgundy when you need him? Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
And we continue to stay classy here in San Diego, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you very much, Corey. Good cooking tonight. Global socialism tonight here on the Evan-Miller Report. All right, moving on to some D.C. news tonight, and Corey is going to love this one. Democrats are all fed up again, and they're ready by throwing in the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. in the wood chipper. Several House Democrats expressed anger today over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's acceptance of a Republican invitation to address Congress next month. Some of the 7 lawmakers, all whom are Jewish and strong supporters of Israel, urged the Prime Minister to postpone the speech or hold it somewhere other than Congress. Participants said they told Ambassador Ron Dermer that Netanyahu was unwise to accept a GOP invitation that bypassed President Obama and to schedule the speech only 2 weeks before Netanyahu seeks another term in Israel's general elections. The meeting's purpose was to try to diffuse the optics of the planned speech to Congress and to return to substantive issues, including involving the two nations, said Representative Steve Israel, Democrat from New York, who hosted the gathering in his House office. Some attendees suggested a different time or venue for a Netanyahu speech. Israel told reporters, but we have a while to go before we have to address whether or not he's coming. Netanyahu's March 3rd speech would focus largely on Iran and its nuclear program, amid delicate negotiations involving the United States and other Western powers, and along with Tehran. Netanyahu's acceptance of House Speaker John Boehner's invitation has infuriated the White House and many congressional Democrats. Representative Israel said the problem began when Boehner decided that Israel would be a political football and he'd spike it in the end zone. Well, you know what, Congressman Israel? And this is a little time for a little hot stove here on the Evan-Miller Report. You can say that all you want about John Boehner using Israel as a political football. Yet why don't you complain about your own commander-in-chief using his 2012 campaign team as a full advertisement on running against with Netanyahu's opponent in defeating Netanyahu in the general elections in Israel? What happens? We bring up that. Oh boy, I'm looking forward to your response. And by the way, you can contact me, Jay Miller, at shrmedia.com, because I would like to get your response to that. You political footballs. Come on.
Oh boy. Jay, you sound like you're gonna have a ball with them.
Ooh, the ball went on fire along with that Doritos commercial on Super Bowl Sunday that sucked.
Yeah, sounds like you enjoyed some bits of it.
Moving on tonight, as I give up my fiery rage for a moment, Senate Republicans put Democrats on record for a second time Wednesday against legislation combining Homeland Security funding with rollbacks of President Obama's immigration policies. But there was little evidence Congress was any closer to a solution to fund the department past February 27th as that deadline approaches. The vote in the Senate was 53 to 47, similar to Tuesday's vote on a similar procedural measure, and well short of the 60 votes that would be needed to open debate on a House-passed Homeland Security measure. The bill would pay for the Homeland Department through September the 30th, the end of the current budget year, and undo Obama's executive actions limiting deportations for millions of people who are in the United States illegally. Another procedural vote was expected Thursday, with perhaps more to come. Democrats said that no matter how many times Republicans held the vote, the outcome would be the same unless the contested language on immigration was removed. Claire McCaskill, Democrat, said, "This is pretty simple. At a time when the world is united in trying to send a strong signal about confronting ISIS and defeating ISIS, I think putting veto bait in the funding for Homeland Security is a very bad idea. ISIS is one acronym for the militant Islamic State group that has taken over parts of Syria and Iraq," she said. Meanwhile, Republican from Ohio, Jim Jordan, said, "We have the strategy. It is to do what the American people sent us to do. That's our legislation." He continued to say that I look at a chance for 7 Democratic senators to find Jesus and do the right thing. Wow. It's not often, Corey Evan, that we have a Republican senator coming out and saying that he wants Democrats to find Jesus. I guess he hasn't been listening to... And you know what? I don't think he's been listening to Reverend Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson either.
Oh boy, Al Sharpton's gonna cry his eyes out tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna love it. Alright, moving on tonight. Finally, wrapping up the D.C. news. 2 justices who were previously supportive of using video cameras in the Supreme Court have apparently backed off their positions. As the court takes some downtime this month, Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor made recent public appearances where they seemed less than excited about the prospect's public cameras being used to record Supreme Court arguments. Justice Sotomayor told an audience in Florida that she now had concerns about how cameras would affect the justices hearing cases and attorneys presenting them. She said, quote, "I am moving more closely to saying I think it may be a bad idea." She said, saying that people may see the courtroom as more of a stage. Justice Kagan made similar remarks in an appearance in Chicago, and she compared the influence of cameras in the courtroom to that of cameras that broadcast live and on a delayed basis in Congress. She said, quote, "If you look at different experiences when cameras come into place, the nature of conversation often changes," Kagan said at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. Honestly, she continued, "I don't think Congress is a great advertisement for this." Both Sotomayor and Kagan supported the use of cameras in testimony given to the Senate during their confirmation hearings. At least 3 other justices are on the record as opposing cameras in the courtroom, and late last year, Chief Justice Roberts said supporters of new technology at the court shouldn't hold their breaths.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Yeah, we may not have cameras in the Supreme Court for any time, but hopefully Corey gets his own camera when he gets his own television series with lawsuits across America. Corey, take it away.
Yes, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Come to order. We're now in session as the state of California agreed Tuesday to pay $2.5 million to settle an excessive force suit filed by an African-American carpenter who was shot at least 8 times by a white CHP rookie during a traffic stop. Oh dear, race relations here, ladies and gentlemen, be weary. The settlement comes as national attention remains focused on the use of force issue by the deaths last year of unarmed black men at the hands of police officers in Ferguson, Missouri, and Staten Island, New York. This from the San Jose Mercury News. The state offered the settlement on the first day of trial in federal court after the officer who shot James Henry Ligon Jr. in 2012 testified that Ligon stepped out of his car and charged directly at him, shouting threats. The problem with CHP officer Joe LaFauci's account was that it didn't match the physical evidence in the case, said Ligon's lawyers Jamie Lianos and Nelson McElmurray. Ligon was shot 4 times in the back, suggesting he was not coming at the officer. LaFauci had only 14 months on the job when he emptied a service pistol of 12 rounds, at least 8 of which hit Ligon. The state attorney general office, which defended LaFauci, could not immediately be reached for comment today. Moving on to item number 2, down to its last strike, San Jose, while we're still in California, is taking one last big swing in court in an attempt to lure the A's to the South Bay. The city council on Tuesday voted unanimously to appeal the U.S. Supreme Court its antitrust lawsuit against Major League Baseball that seeks to allow the Oakland Baseball Club to move to San Jose. It comes 2 weeks after an appeals court ruled against San Jose. It remains unclear, however, whether the Supreme Court will take up the case, and there have been no shortage of legal experts who doubt the battle will ever make it to Washington, D.C. The court only agrees to hear about 75 to 80 cases each year, or about 0.8% of the appeals it receives. The A's have been unable to move south because of objections from the San Francisco Giants, which have territorial rights over Santa Clara County. After more diplomatic efforts to convince the Giants and MLB over 4 years to prove fruitless, the city sued baseball in June 2013. But the city has already suffered Strike 1, a U.S. District Judge ruled against San Jose in 2013, and Strike 2, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals also ruled in favor of MLB in January, leaving the Supreme Court as the city's only remaining option. The appeal was expected as the city will continue to get free services from its outside law team if it loses. And the council and the A's last year agreed to an extension of up to 7 years to hold aside a downtown parcel in case the ballpark is approved. Which does seem to be a long shot, or should I say, a fever pitch.
Ooh, nice work. 2 weeks before spring training, and Corey's already going over pitch counts and strategies. Nice.
Yes. I gotta keep track of balls and strikes. And hopefully I'll be able to report if that becomes an out. And speaking of his favorite count when it's no balls, 2 strikes, or is it 2 strikes, no balls? I don't know. Don't ask. He knows more about sports. Sports is my worst subject, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I leave to Jay.
Well, he did a good job on this story, ladies and gentlemen. So, hey, I gotta give him credit where credit's due. What else?
Yes. I've got one from New York. A group of doctors and terminally ill patients are asking New York courts to declare that doctor-assisted suicide is legal and not covered by the state's prohibition on helping people take their own lives. This from the New York Times. Under long-time interpretations of state law, a doctor who helps a terminally ill patient die by providing a fatal dose of medication can be prosecuted under the manslaughter statute, which covers anyone who intentionally causes or aids another person to commit suicide. The suit was filed in State Supreme Court in Manhattan on Wednesday, contending that the law was intended to prevent someone from, for instance, helping a lovesick teenager kill himself, but not to stop a doctor from helping a mentally competent, terminally ill patient die. The plaintiffs also argued that because doctors are already allowed to help terminally ill patients die in some circumstances, such as when they remove life support, the fact that they cannot hasten death for other terminally ill patients violates the Equal Protection Clause of the state constitution, they say. Kathleen Gallagher, director of pro-life activities for the New York State Catholic Conference, said that while she had not seen the court papers, the conference was generally opposed to assisted suicide. Ms. Gallagher said that permitting assisted suicide would undermine the physician's role as a healer and could eventually be used as the most financially expedient option. Samuel Gorovitz, a professor of philosophy at Syracuse University who has written extensively about biomedical ethics, said the lawsuit struck him as an effort to circumvent the law by people who thought that that is easier than changing it. Dr. Gorovitz was part of a 1994 report on assisted suicide by the state's Task Force on Life and the Law, which decided that the law should not be changed. So it's going to be interesting to see how this case goes. And I'm sure Dr. Kevorkian would be happy to hear this case if he were still with us. And on that bombshell, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed. And as of right now, R&B singer Bobby Brown and his family requires privacy regarding the matter of his daughter Bobby Christina Brown being in the hospital after she was found unconscious in a bathtub at her home in Atlanta. He requested the media and the press to allow his family to deal with the matter and give her daughter the love and support that she needs. This according to Sotheby.com.
If Mr. Brown wants privacy, that's fine. Let's just cut the story completely. Give the next story. They want privacy, we can't talk about it anymore. Go on to the next
Good
story.
idea, Jay. With speculation flying, Bruce Jenner, a.k.a. his mother, opened up Wednesday about his Jenner journey. Esther Jenner has been besieged by calls from the media in recent days, but the widow in Lewiston, Idaho isn't interested in fueling gossip. Instead, in a wide-ranging, nearly hour-long phone interview, she praised her Olympian son, or should we call daughter. I know, right, Jay? She praised her Olympian son/daughter for his courage, stopping short of some details that have been floated by unnamed sources online and in tabloids. Jenner, who won gold as a decathlete in the 1976 Games, has not publicly spoken about transitioning to a woman. His appearance has gradually become more traditionally feminine. A publicist for the 65-year-old Jenner would not comment about his mother's remarks, nor would E! Entertainment on word that Jenner will appear in a reality series about his journey. And I'm sure Jay is about to reach for the nearest wastebasket to have a jolly puke over this story, isn't he? I called it, folks! I knew it! I knew it was making him sick to his stomach. And, of course, I just had to bring Dude Looks Like a Lady into it because, well, it does fit the story. Exactly.
Alright, thank you very much, Corey Evan, with the Entertainment Report tonight. And, folks, a programming note on tomorrow's program. We have a very special guest joining us tomorrow on the Evan-Miller Report. State Representative from District 45 in Denver, Colorado, Representative Patrick Neville will join us. For those of you not familiar with Patrick is a survivor of the Columbine shootings, and tomorrow he will be joining us to talk about current legislation that would enable teachers to have concealed weapons permits in classrooms. We're going to be interviewing him tomorrow to talk about that, so we hope you tune into that. Also, for Friday's program as well, we have a very special guest joining us as well here on the program. Commissioner Richard Rothschild will be joining us. He's one of the most influential commissioners in the United States right now. He's out of Maryland, and he's fighting on many fronts, including Agenda 21, ICLEI, and his own personal battle with the rain tax inside the state of Maryland. Stay tuned to SHR Media. We got a bunch of great interviews coming up this week. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan-Miller Report for this Wednesday, February the 4th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook.com/The Evan-Miller Report and tweet us at EM Radio Report. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at Evan-Miller Report and SHR Media, we thank you very much for listening. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. The Exceptional Conservative Show is coming up next. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you later, everybody.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.